Vivid verses.
The first guest who told me was Margaret Holloway, and she did it the way Margaret does everything, with the careful diction of a woman who has rehearsed the sentence in her car. Adrian, darling. Her hand on my forearm, her eyes on mine, her voice pitched just above the string quartet. I had no idea you and Cordelia had separated. She introduced me to her fiancé not 5 minutes ago. He seems perfectly nice, but, well, I wanted to say how sorry I am. These things are never easy. I held her gaze for a beat longer than was strictly necessary. Long enough to let her see that whatever she'd expected to find in my face wasn't going to arrive on schedule. You're very kind, Margaret. Have you tried the salmon? I had it flown in specifically because I remembered you saying last year that you didn't care for the duck. She blinked, recovered, smiled the way women of her generation smile when they've been gracefully redirected by someone they like. You remembered that? I remember everything you tell me. It's why we get along. She drifted toward the salmon, and I drifted toward the bar, and I held a glass of something I had no intention of drinking, and I thought, one source. Margaret is honest, but she's also a gossip, and gossips embellish. I need confirmation before I do anything other than smile. The string quartet was playing something appropriate. The candles on the long tables down the marquee were the precise warm white I'd specified 4 months ago. Not the bluish LEDs the rental company had tried to substitute, but the ones I'd had Cordelia source from the vendor she'd located through a contact in the theater world. Credit where it's due. She had a good eye when she chose to use it. The fiancé. I'll let the word sit in my mind without inflection. Fiancé. Not boyfriend, not partner. Fiancé. A word that requires a ring. And a ring requires either a long enough interval to seem reasonable or a short enough one to seem reckless. Either way, it required something I had not authorized. I scanned the marquee. There she was, near the second pillar, in the green dress she'd bought specifically for tonight. Beside her, a man I did not recognize, tall, sandy-haired, wearing a suit cut slightly too well for the room. Cordelia was laughing at something he'd said. She was not laughing the way she laughed at things I said. She was laughing the way she laughed when she wanted to be observed laughing. Interesting choice, I thought, to bring him here, to my gala, to the event she has spent 6 months helping me coordinate. There are only 2 reasons to do that. Either she wants me to find out, or she has already decided she does not need to be careful anymore. I sipped the drink I wasn't drinking. I made the calculation. She wants me to find out. She wants the room to find out. She has chosen this venue because she has decided that the social embarrassment is itself the lever. That was the moment the first quiet click happened in my head. The sound a lock makes when a tumbler falls into place. Adrian. A second hand on my arm. Frances Whitten this time, my mother's oldest friend, who had been at every gala since the first one, 6 years ago. I just met the loveliest young man. Cordelia's intended, apparently. I confess I'm out of the loop. When did you two part ways? It's been a transition, I said, which was the kind of word that meant nothing and therefore could not be contradicted later. Francis, you must let me introduce you to the chair of the foundation. He's been wanting to meet you. She let me steer her toward Bertrand, and Bertrand was charming, and I left them and walked to the back of the marquee and stepped through the gap in the canvas and out into the cool air of the gardens. 2. A coincidence is 1. A pattern is 2. Margaret and Francis do not coordinate. I took out my phone. Not to text anyone. Not yet. I opened the app I'd built with my account 9 months ago, back when Cordelia had first asked, with the lightest possible touch, whether she might take on a more substantive role in coordinating the gala's logistics. The app was a parallel ledger. Every transaction processed through the gala's payment system mirrored itself, in real time, to a second feed I and only I could see. My accountant called it the shadow book. He had laughed when I asked him to set it up. You're being paranoid, Adrian. He'd done it anyway, because he knew that being paranoid and being correct are, in my experience, often the same thing. I opened the shadow book. I scrolled. I stopped. The vendor payments were, on the whole, correct. The catering, the marquee, the lighting, the florist, the music, the printing, all of those reconciled cleanly. But there was a category called miscellaneous logistics that Cordelia had been authorized to allocate at her discretion up to a ceiling I had set deliberately low. And in the last 3 weeks, the miscellaneous logistics line had absorbed 17 separate payments to 4 entities I did not recognize. None individually large, cumulatively significant, routed through accounts that, on a casual audit, would look like florist suppliers or rental subsidiaries. I looked at the names. I committed them to memory. I closed the app. I stood in the garden and listened to the murmur of the marquee behind me and the distant sound of someone laughing. Not Cordelia, someone else, and I felt for perhaps the 3rd time in my adult life the very particular cold clarity that arrives when you realize a person you have allowed close to you has been operating with a different script than the one you were reading from. Now, I thought, be precise. I'll let myself feel it for 10 seconds. The anger, the disappointment, the smaller, meaner thing underneath both, which was the embarrassment of having been read incorrectly by someone I had trusted to read me at all. I gave each of those feelings exactly the time they were owed, and then I set them down on the gravel of the path beside me, and I left them there. The question is not whether to act. The question is sequence. She would expect, if she'd thought about this at all, one of 2 responses. The first, I would confront her tonight in front of guests in the high color of a man whose pride had been wounded in his own house. That would give her exactly what she had brought the fiancé to obtain. The public spectacle, in which her version of events would have the advantage of having been rehearsed. The second, I would freeze her out coldly, send a curt email in the morning, refuse to engage, and allow her to construct the narrative of the bitter ex who could not handle being left. Neither was acceptable. Both ceded the framing to her. The third option, the one she had not modeled, because people who behave the way she was behaving rarely model their counterparties carefully, was that I would simply finish the evening as if nothing had happened, allow her to believe she had landed every blow she had thrown, and then, before sunrise on Monday, remove every lever she had touched, recover every penny she had redirected, and reintroduce myself, individually, to every member of my network before her version of events had time to set. That was the option I chose. I went back inside. I found Bertram by the bar, told him a small joke about Francis, watched him laugh, and asked him quietly whether he had a moment after the speeches. He nodded. He has known me long enough to recognize the request as not social. I found the foundation's secretary, Iona, at the seating chart near the entrance. I asked her, with the air of a man making a casual observation, whether she'd noticed anything unusual in the vendor correspondence over the past few weeks. She glanced at me. She is very sharp. There's been a slightly higher volume of last-minute substitutions than I'd expected, she said carefully. Cordelia has been managing them directly. I assumed you'd signed off. I had not been signing off, I said. I'd been letting her run them. That was my arrangement with her. But I'd appreciate it, Iona, if you could pull every email she's sent through the Foundation's account in the last 6 weeks and forward them to me by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow being Sunday, she said. Tomorrow being Sunday. She held my eye. Understood. That was the moment the second tumbler fell. Iona, who had worked with me for 4 years and Cordelia for 1, had said understood without asking why, which meant Iona had wondered too, which meant the pattern had already been visible to someone with daily proximity, and I had been the last person in my own house to look directly at it. Note that, I thought, not as a reproach to yourself, but as data. You let the proximity blind you. You will not let it blind you again. I returned to the floor of the marquee. I shook hands. I made the speech I had prepared, which was about the Foundation's beneficiaries and not about myself, and not about Cordelia, and not about anything that could be construed afterwards as a coded message. I thanked the donors. I thanked the volunteers. I named 7 people specifically, including Cordelia, with neither warmth nor coolness. Exactly the register I would have used if nothing had happened. I sat down. The dessert course began. She caught my eye across the room once. I lifted my glass an inch toward her. She smiled. She thought I had not noticed yet. The fiancé did not look at me at all, which was itself information. A man who had been told he was meeting his partner's amicable ex would have, at some point in the evening, sought out a polite handshake. He was avoiding me deliberately, which meant he had been told a story about me, and the story had instructed him to stay clear. What story, I wondered, and who else has she told it to? That was, I decided, the more important question. The money was simple. The money could be unpicked by Monday lunchtime with 3 phone calls and a solicitor's letter. The narrative was the harder problem, because narratives, once installed in a network of people, calcify into received truth within weeks if they are not actively contested. But you cannot contest a narrative directly. You cannot send a round-robin email reading certain things you may have heard about me are untrue. That is an admission that the things have been said and that they have wounded you. The only effective contest is to be, in person, individually, in front of every relevant member of the network, undeniably and visibly the man they have always known. To let the contrast do the work. I would need a list of the people who mattered, of the order in which to see them. I began making it in my head over the cheese course. I did not sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table from 11 until 4 in the morning with my laptop, the shadow book, a notebook, and a cup of coffee I refilled 3 times. I did not call anyone. I did not text Cordelia. I did not draft an email I would not send. I worked. I traced every redirected payment. Each of the 4 shell entities resolved, with 30 minutes of patient digging through the registry, to either Cordelia personally, her brother, or, and this was the detail that made me sit back in my chair and exhale, a numbered company whose register correspondence address matched the one on the fiancé's small consulting firm. Not him directly, a company adjacent to him. Plausible deniability for both of them, individually, but collectively damning when you laid the diagram out on a single page. I laid it out on a single page. I took photographs of the page from 3 angles. I scanned the receipts. I exported the shadow book in 2 formats. I emailed all of it to my accountant, my solicitor, and a copy to a personal account I kept on a different provider for exactly this kind of contingency. I wrote the email in the calmest, most procedural language I could manage, because emails to professionals are best written as if they will one day be read aloud in a room you are not in. For I had the full picture. For I also had the early outline of every move I would make in the coming 5 days. Monday morning, solicitor's office, in person with the binder. By 11, a formal letter goes to Cordelia by recorded delivery, summarizing the discovered discrepancies, demanding return of the recovered amounts within 14 days, and stating that her access to all Foundation systems has been revoked effective immediately. The letter is professional. It does not editorialize. It does not mention the fiancé. It mentions only the financial facts. Monday afternoon, every system password rotated, every authorization revoked, every vendor contact emailed individually with a brief, neutral note that Cordelia is no longer involved with the Foundation's logistics and that all future correspondence should be directed to Iona or to me personally. No explanation offered. None needed. Vendors do not require reasons. Vendors require contacts. Monday evening, dinner with Bertrand at his house, just the 2 of us. Not to brief him, not to seek allies. simply to be present in his life, the way I had always been, and to allow the comparison between whatever Cordelia had told him and whoever he was sitting across from to make itself. Tuesday through Friday, the rest of the network. 6 dinners, 2 coffees, 3 phone calls. Margaret, Francis, the other major donors, the board members, my oldest friend Theo, who had introduced me to Cordelia in the first place and who, I suspected, was carrying more weight on this than he should be. I closed the laptop at 4:15 and went to bed and slept 4 hours. The Monday letter was delivered at 10:43 in the morning. I know because the recorded delivery system pings. By 11:12, I had a missed call from her. By 11:14, a second. By 11:30, a text. Adrian, can we talk? I think there has been a serious misunderstanding. I read it twice. I noted the construction. I think there has been. Passive. Diffused. As if the misunderstanding were a weather event neither of us had caused. I did not reply. By 12:40, there was a longer message. This is being handled in a way that is going to embarrass both of us. I'm asking you, as a courtesy, to call me before this escalates. There are things you don't understand about the payments, and I would like the chance to explain them in person before solicitors get involved further. Please. I read this 3 times. I admired, in a detached way, the craft of it. Embarrass both of us. An attempt to suggest mutual exposure where there was, in fact, asymmetric exposure. Things you don't understand. The implication that I was reacting hastily to incomplete information when I had spent the weekend assembling the most complete information either of us would ever possess. Before solicitors get involved further, an attempt to negotiate down from a position she did not realize had already been documented and filed. Please, the only word in the message that registered as authentic, and even that probably wasn't. I forwarded the text to my solicitor with a 1-line note. No reply being made. Please advise if you would like a copy of any further correspondence. He replied within 10 minutes. Continue to make no reply. Forward everything. We'll draft a follow-up letter for your review by end of day stating that all communications must now be made in writing through this office. I closed the message. I went to a meeting with Iona. I drank a coffee. I did not think about it again until the evening. Bertrand's house is 20 minutes from mine. I walked the last 10 of those because the air was cold and I wanted to clear my head before I sat across from him. He opened the door, kissed his wife Marjorie on the cheek, took my coat, poured me a whiskey I did not particularly want, but accepted because the gesture was the point. How are you, Adrian? Working through a few things. Thank you for tonight. You always work through things by appearing entirely undisturbed by them. It is one of your most disconcerting qualities. I laughed. He has known me 20 years. He is one of the 3 people in the world who can read me reliably, and he doesn't pretend not to. Can I ask you something, Bertrand? You can. When did Cordelia first reach out to you about anything? About me? About the foundation? About anything that wasn't transactional? He held the whiskey in his hand for a long moment. About 6 weeks ago, she asked to have lunch. She said she wanted my advice, as someone who had known you for a long time, about how to handle a difficult conversation she was preparing to have with you. She framed it as concern. She said she was worried you were under too much pressure, that you had been increasingly difficult to reach, that she was thinking of stepping back from the relationship and didn't want it to damage the foundation. I see. I told her I thought you were exactly as reachable as you have ever been. I told her that any decision she made about her personal life with you was hers to make, but that I would not be a confidant in the strategic management of it. He set the whiskey down. She did not contact me again. Thank you for telling me. I'm telling you because the rumor mill has started. Margaret called Marjorie this morning. Apparently, a few people at the gala were given let's say, a context for the fiancé's appearance. The context made you sound rather worse than the version I observed at the gala. I dismissed it. Marjorie dismissed it. But I would not assume that everyone at every dinner table this week is dismissing it. I'm not assuming that. I'm planning to see most of them this week. Good. He looked at me. Adrian, are you all right? I took a moment to answer this, because Bertrand deserved an answer that was true. I am clearer, I said, than I have been in some time. I'm not all right. But the not all rightness is contained. I know exactly where it is, and it is not interfering with the work. That is not a yes. It is not. Good. I would have been worried if it were. We had dinner. Marjorie talked about her garden. Bertrand talked about a book he was reading. I talked about a piece of music I had been listening to. None of us mentioned Cordelia again. It was the most restorative 2 hours I had had in 9 months. I walked home in the cold, and on the way I thought about the construction of what Cordelia had been doing. About 6 weeks ago. So she had begun the social groundwork at roughly the same time as the first redirected payment. The financial extraction and the narrative extraction had been parallel projects, run in coordination, and the gala had been chosen as the moment of public conversion, when the soft shop story of the difficult Adrian who was driving her away would meet the hard shop reality of the fiancé, and the network would arrive at the conclusion she had been seeding for them. It was, I had to admit, a competent operation. It had only one weakness, which was that it depended on me reacting in one of the 2 ways she had modeled. I had not reacted in either of them. Tuesday was Margaret. Wednesday was Francis. Thursday was the board chair, Hugo, who is older than my father and who treats me with a kind of wry patience that suggests he has watched a great many men my age make a great many predictable mistakes and is mildly relieved when one of us doesn't. Each of these was the same conversation in different rooms. I did not raise Cordelia. I did not raise the gala. I did not raise the fiancé. I sat across from each of them, asked them about themselves, listened to them, told them small true things about my own life. Not curated things, not strategic things, but the actual texture of my week, and let them observe me for 90 minutes. Margaret, on the way out, said, I think I owe you an apology, Adrian. I let myself be told a story at the gala, and I repeated it to 1 or 2 people before I'd thought it through. I'm going to call them this week. You don't owe me an apology, Margaret. You acted in good faith on what you've been told. I'm grateful you were honest with me at the gala, because it gave me the early warning I needed. Is there anything you'd like me to say when I call them? Only what you actually think. That's all that ever lands anyway. She kissed me on the cheek and went home. Frances, halfway through her second glass of wine, I've been thinking about how she introduced him. In retrospect, the timing was so peculiar. I assumed at the time it was awkward, but well meant. I've revised that assumption. You're very perceptive, Frances. I'm a perceptive old woman with too much time. But yes, Hugo, over a long lunch at his club, did not raise Cordelia at all. He talked about the foundation. He talked about the year ahead. He talked about a candidate he was considering nominating to the board. At the end of the lunch, as we stood to leave, he said, Adrian, you handled the gala beautifully. I want you to know I noticed. Thank you, Hugo. I noticed several things, in fact. I have been chairman of 3 different boards over 40 years, and I have seen quieter operations go badly. Yours did not. He buttoned his coat. If at any point this week or next you require an older voice on a telephone for any reason, you have mine. You will not need it. But you have it. I shook his hand. I went home. That was the moment I knew the network would hold. Hugo does not offer his hand on a telephone to people whose situations he is unsure about. Hugo had already done his own analysis. Hugo had reached his own conclusions. And Hugo, without asking me a single question about Cordelia, had communicated in a sentence and a half that the senior layer of the foundation was undisturbed. The narrative was not going to set. Friday evening, Theo came to my house. I had asked him to come. I had not seen him since the gala. He had texted me twice during the week, once on Tuesday, thinking of you, mate, and once on Thursday, let me know when you want to talk. I had replied to neither, not out of coldness, but because I wanted to see him last, and I wanted to see him in my own kitchen. He arrived at 7. I had made pasta because pasta is the food you cook for the friend you have known longest, and I had opened a bottle of the wine he had introduced me to 15 years ago. He sat at the island. He did not take off his coat for the first 5 minutes, which is the Theo equivalent of being unable to settle. Adrian. Theo, take your coat off. He took his coat off. I owe you a conversation. You don't owe me anything. You introduced me to her in good faith 4 years ago. You couldn't have known. That's the thing I want to talk to you about. I'm not sure I couldn't have. I poured him wine. I did not interrupt. I waited. There were things 3 or 4 months in that I noticed. Small things. The way she talked about you when you weren't there versus when you were. The way she cataloged your friends. I told myself I was overreading it because I'm a cynic and I overread everyone. I told myself you're an adult and you'd see what you needed to see. I didn't say anything. He looked at the wine. He did not drink it. And then about 2 months ago, she had coffee with me. She said she wanted my perspective on you because I'd known you the longest. She asked questions that, in retrospect, were not the questions of a partner trying to understand. They were the questions of a person building a file. I came home and told my wife about it, and my wife said, Theo, that woman is mapping him. And I still didn't call you. He looked up. I'm sorry. I should have called you. I didn't because I told myself I didn't have proof, and the truth is I just didn't want to be the friend who delivered that news. I prioritized my own comfort over your information. I'm sorry. I let the silence sit. This is a real apology, I thought. It is specific. It identifies the exact failure. It does not request reassurance. The correct response to a real apology is not to absolve. The correct response is to acknowledge and to be honest about what it cost. Theo, I appreciate that. I want to say 2 things. The first is that you're right. A phone call 2 months ago would have given me a clearer line of sight, and I would have made some of the choices I made over the last 2 weeks earlier and with less personal cost. So yes, the cost was real. It is also recoverable, and I have largely recovered it. The second thing is that I have known you for 25 years, and a single failure of nerve in the middle of 25 years of consistent friendship is not the kind of thing I weigh heavily. You've shown up for me in every other instance in which it mattered. You did not show up in this one. We are square on the ledger overall, and I would like us to remain so. He looked at me for a long time. He picked up the wine. He drank some of it. You know what's strange about you, Adrian? Everything probably. Be specific. Most people, when they get hit like this, either go to pieces or they go cold. You've done neither. You're sitting here exactly the way you sat across from me at university the night my father died. Same person, same temperature. I find it disconcerting and also reassuring, and I have no idea which of those reactions is correct. Both, I said. It's the same quality. It's just useful for different things. He laughed. He drank more of the wine. He took off his shoes and put his feet on the rung of the stool, which is what he does when he has finally arrived in a room. We talked about other things until midnight. He left at 1:15. I cleaned the kitchen. I went to bed and slept 7 hours, which was the most I had slept in 3 weeks. The fiancé called me the following Tuesday. I had not expected this. Cordelia had stopped contacting me after the 3rd unanswered text on Monday of the previous week. The solicitor's letter had gone out. The recovered funds had been recovered. The vendor contacts had been notified. Iona had taken over the residual coordination cleanly. I had heard, indirectly through Margaret, that Cordelia and the fiancé had postponed something, an engagement party or a trip. The detail was not clear and not important. So when the unknown number came up on my phone at 11 on a Tuesday morning and a male voice said, "Adrian, my name is Quentin Marsh. I think you know who I am. I'm asking for 15 minutes of your time." I was briefly surprised. Not by the call, by the directness of it. "Go on," I said. "I'd rather do it in person if you'll agree to it. I'm not asking for anything. I'm not negotiating on her behalf. I just want 15 minutes across the table." I considered this. I considered it for perhaps 4 seconds. The standard advice, I thought, would be to refuse. The standard advice would be that there is nothing to gain from this conversation and several things to lose. The standard advice would be that he is either acting on her instructions, in which case he is a vector, or acting against them, in which case he is unreliable. The standard advice is correct in most cases. It is not correct in this one. I want to see him. I want to see for myself what kind of man she chose. And I want him to see, for himself, the man she described to him. The asymmetry of information is currently in my favor. A meeting will not change that. It will only let me confirm something I already suspect. "There's a coffee place on the corner of Brentford Road and the High Street," I said. "Tomorrow at 3. 15 minutes. If I think you're going to take longer, I'll leave at the 15-minute mark." "Understood. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." I hung up. He was already there when I arrived, which surprised me. I had arrived 10 minutes early specifically to be the one who was already there. He was at a corner table. He had 2 coffees in front of him. He stood up when he saw me, which was either good manners or coaching. "I took the liberty of ordering you a flat white. Margaret said it was your usual." I wasn't sure whether to ask her, but "You asked Margaret." "I asked Margaret." "That was a mistake. Margaret will tell Francis by the end of the day. By Friday, 8 people will know you," and I had coffee. "Sit down." He sat down. I sat down. I did not touch the coffee. "I'll be quick. I came to say 2 things, and then I'll go. The first thing is that I've broken off the engagement. As a Sunday. The second thing is that I'm not telling you this because I want anything from you. I'm telling you this because I think I owe you the data point, and because in the last week I have read enough correspondence and seen enough documents that I understand the position I was placed in, and I would rather you hear from me directly that the position is no longer occupied." I looked at him. I assessed. He is nervous, but not theatrically nervous. He is not asking for forgiveness. He is not asking me to like him. He is delivering information. The phrasing, the position I was placed in, is interesting. It is the phrasing of a man who has come to understand that he was a piece on a board he did not know he was on. "How much did you know?" I asked. "And when did you know it?" "Almost nothing until 10 days ago. I knew you and she had been together. I was told you'd ended things badly 6 months ago and that she'd been processing it. I was told the gala was an obligation she was honoring out of professionalism, and that introducing me there was the cleanest way to signal closure. I was told quite a lot of other things about you that I am not going to repeat because I no longer believe any of them, and because repeating them would be its own kind of unkindness. And what changed 10 days ago? The solicitor's letter arrived at the flat. She left it on the kitchen counter. I read the first paragraph by accident and the next 4 on purpose. I asked her about the payments. She gave me an answer that did not match the document. I asked again. She gave me a second answer that did not match the first answer or the document. I spent the next 4 days going through what I had access to. By Friday, I had enough to know that I had been the cover for something I had not consented to be cover for. By Saturday, I had moved out. By Sunday, I had ended it. "How are you?" I asked, and I meant it. He looked up at me. He had not expected the question. I will be all right. I'm angrier than I want to be. I feel stupid. I feel like I should have noticed earlier. He stopped. I'm aware that whatever I'm feeling, you have been feeling for longer and with more cause, and I did not come here to perform my distress in front of you. You're not performing. You're answering a question. There is a difference. He nodded. He drank some of his coffee. Quentin, yes, I appreciate that you came. I am not going to be your friend, and I'm not going to be a confidant for what you're going through, because the asymmetry of how we ended up at this table means that any closeness between us would not be healthy for either of us. But I will say this. You behaved well in the last 10 days. You read the documents. You asked the questions twice. You moved out. You ended it. You came here to give me the data point in person rather than letting me hear it through Margaret next week. Most men in your position would not have done any of those things. I want you to know that I noticed. His eyes went slightly wet. He controlled it. Thank you. You should go now. The 15 minutes is up. I'm leaving first. Stay and finish your coffee. I stood. I took the flat white with me because I had decided over the course of the conversation that I would drink it after all. I walked out of the coffee shop. I did not look back. On the pavement, I let myself feel one more thing for 10 seconds. He is the person she had chosen to replace me with. He is decent. He is in some ways more decent than I am. The thing she did to two of us. We are not allies and we will never speak again, but we were briefly both pieces on the same board, and we both took ourselves off it within roughly the same week. That is an outcome. I set that down on the pavement too. I walked back to the office. The following year's gala was on the second Saturday of October. I chaired alone. I did not appoint a logistics coordinator. I worked with Iona, with the foundation's small permanent staff, and with the vendors I had personally vetted, and I made every decision myself. The marquee was the same supplier. The candles were the same warm white. The music, I changed. I went with a small jazz quartet rather than a string ensemble because I had wanted to do this for 3 years and Cordelia had argued me out of it on the grounds of donor expectations. The donors loved the jazz quartet. 2 of them mentioned it in their letters afterwards. The salmon stayed. The duck went. The seating chart took me 4 evenings to build. I did not delegate it. I put Margaret next to a new donor I thought she'd like, and I put Francis next to Hugo because they had not seen each other in a year, and I knew they would talk for the entire evening. I put Theo and his wife at my table. Bertrand, in his speech, I had asked him to give the toast, said something I have thought about several times since. He said that there is a particular quality to a room that has been built by one person from start to finish, with no compromises and no quiet sabotage, and that you can feel it in the air of the marquee within the first 10 minutes of arriving. He said the room felt, this year, like the man it had been built by, and that this had not always been the case in previous years, and that he wanted to raise his glass to the version of the foundation that was now visible. I did not respond to the toast directly. I thanked him. I thanked the donors. I named everyone who had worked on the evening, 12 people, all of whom I had selected, all of whom had done their jobs well. I sat down. The dessert course began. Late in the evening, after the speeches and after most of the dancing, I stepped out through the same gap in the canvas I had stepped through a year before. I stood in the same garden. The air was the same temperature.
Thanks for listening.